All right, I think we are ready to start. Hello and welcome to all. My name is Lulit Mola, and it is such an honor to be here with all three of you today to facilitate this time and space to have the necessary and joyful conversation that is Black women shaping change. So what a time we're in supporting, being in community with, following the leadership of Black women is a passion and hobby of mine. So I'm sure I'm not alone. And we want to make sure we thank the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for hosting this conference, as well as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for hosting this specific space for us to engage. I have been thinking a lot about shaping lately, in particular, Octavia Butler's teaching about shaping change and how God is change. And what is true is that Black women have always shaped change and made change not only possible for Black women and Black families, but for all humanity. So lately, in reflection, we know that another world is not only possible. In 2020, it is forming around us, and it is in large part thanks to the leadership of Black women. And in this hour, we are joined by three phenomenal women who've shaped political, economical, and social change, and continue to take us into a new just world with infinite possibilities. Welcome Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Dr. Angela Davis, and Commissioner Angela Conley to this conversation. So it's going to be a good time. We already said it's already a loving space with all of us expressing our gratitude and excitement for joining this conversation. We'll start with brief opening remarks with all three of you, and then we'll dive into the conversation. How does that sound?
Great.
Sounds good? Okay, so I'll do some brief intros. We'll start with the Congresswoman, and then we'll go to Dr. Angela Davis, and then Commissioner Angela Conley. So I'll start with introducing Congresswoman Ilhan. Representative Omar represents my district, Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, which includes Minneapolis and surrounding suburbs. Congresswoman Omar is an experienced policy analyst, organizer, visionary, and advocate. Representative Omar was sworn into office January 2019, making her the first Somali American member of Congress, the first woman of color to represent Minnesota, and one of the first 2 Muslim American women elected to Congress. I have to take this moment to also say Congresswoman Omar not only represents Minneapolis in Congress, but is so beloved here in our community. And I know Commissioner Conley may agree. You represent such resilience and deep community love, especially in this time where we're experiencing a lot of pain, as Minneapolis is a catalyst for a global reignite movement for Black liberation. And I want to honor all of the Black women and men and people we have lost to state-sanctioned violence. We honor them in this space. We hold their lives in high regard. Congresswoman Omar, I'd like to invite you to provide opening remarks, and then I'll go on to introducing the other 2 panelists.
Well, thank you, Lalit. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for joining us in moderating this beautiful discussion that we are about to have as we celebrate our womanhood, our Blackness, and what it means to lead in times of change. I am so glad to be joined by my sisters in the struggle, women I admire so much, Dr. Angela Davis and Commissioner Angela Conley. Yay for the Angelas. to talk about how Black women have paved the way for structural change. More than 50 years ago, Malcolm X said, "The most neglected person in America is a Black woman." Too often in struggles in the United States and around the world for a just society, Black women are simply erased. Let's look at the struggles for voting rights in the 19th Amendment. Who is celebrated doesn't include the women who were bold and aggressive in fighting for that change. Maria Stewart, the first woman to speak in public about the politics and women's struggles before both Black and white women, is erased from our history. Mary Church Terrell, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Franny Barrier Williams, and Ida B. Wells Barnett all refused to separate race from sex, insisting that their voices be heard in both movements that were impacting them. But these are not the statues that we see in Capitol buildings. The ways in which this erasure happens and the acknowledgement of that erasure is one that is important, because you can't be proud of your history and space in society if there is no history and you have not been seen but erased from society. As Marianne Wright Ellman says, "You can't be what you can't see." This is one of my sister's favorite quotes. So in order for us to build an inclusive society right now, we need to ask these tough questions today. Who is missing from the conversation? How is that showing up for us today? Is there erasure happening in this day? We talk a lot about Black girl magic, but we don't spend enough time talking about Black girl work. There is a way in which our work, our sweat equity is never recognized. So I am proud, right, to be the first Black woman to ever represent our state in Congress. That fact alone does not determine my value, because I also put in the work to make sure that our children are fed, to make sure our homeless are housed, to make sure our students can afford an education. So today, when we are talking about what it means to live in this moment of the Black Lives Matter movement and the recognition of how important our lives are, it is also important to uplift the Black women, the femmes who have founded this movement, who have created this moment, who have created the space in which this organizing is happening and the reshaping of our society for the betterment is taking place. So I want us today to get a moment to not only celebrate the leadership of Black women, but to also engage in an opportunity to lift it up. We actively practice shine theory. Angel Conley and I talk about this in our organizing work in Minneapolis and in Hennepin County and in Minnesota. And I know, last year when I felt like I was under siege, Dr. Angela Davis helped organize a movement of Black women across this nation to come to the Capitol to say, hands off Ilhan, because it is important for us not to only celebrate each other, but to make sure others are recognizing our worth and are celebrating the work that we are putting in to create a better society for all of us. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for agreeing to moderate. And thank you to these two amazing women for agreeing to join us for this important discussion.
Thank you, Congresswoman Omar. That was beautifully articulated. And now as I pivot to introducing Dr. Angela Davis, who needs no introduction, but I'll attempt it anyways. I know when you're talking about history, Dr. Davis is really a bridge for us in this continuum that is change. So all night I've been thinking about how do I introduce Angela Davis, and the best way I know how to articulate who Dr. Angela Davis means to us in our movement is by saying she is a living ancestor. A woman who has given, taught, paved, and shaped the movement and continue to do so today. An activist, a teacher, a storyteller, a Black feminist, an intersectional justice warrior, uncompromisingly combining the struggles of gender, race, class, labor, and more, an abolitionist of prisons and systems that hold too many of us down, a builder. Angela Davis is a scholar, political activist, and author. She's seen the movement from multiple angles through her lived experience as a Black woman in the United States and a formerly incarcerated person on the front lines of protest, working with powerful organizations like the Black Panther Party. She's seen the movement globally, nationally, and locally. She's ran for political office twice. And she's taught us every single day, and she also teaches many students, or taught many students in classrooms. And finally, as I said, in this historical time of change, we are so grateful to have Dr. Angela Davis be here to teach us about what has been and also dream with us about what can be. So welcome, Dr. Angela Davis, Professor, as I'll refer to you from here on, and I invite you to share some opening remarks with us.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this conversation on the historical role Black women have played moving us in radical democratic socialist directions. It is really a profound honor to be in the virtual presence of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is, of course, in Washington, our leader, our inspiration, our hope, especially during these difficult times. And it is also an honor to meet Commissioner Angela Connolly. There are a lot of Angelas in the house, in the virtual house this evening. I think I want to focus my opening remarks on the part that Black women have played in forging what we now call intersectionality. As Congresswoman Omar pointed out, women like Anna Julia Cooper, Mary Church Terrell, Ida B. Wells, and others have over the decades urged us to think race and class and gender together. And I think that if one looks at the fact that already in 1892, Anna Julia Cooper wrote a collection of essays called A Voice from the South, in which she emphasized the interrelationalities of racism and sexism. And if I fast forward almost a century, I could talk about Fran Beale, who still lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I am now, who wrote this pivotal article entitled To Be Black and Female. And then there was also Claudia Jones, a Black woman communist from Trinidad, who in 1949 wrote this article called An End to the Problems of the Negro Woman. Maybe we'll have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that before this program is over. But I wanted to simply provide a kind of overview. I think about the Third World Women's Alliance and their newspaper, which was called Triple Jeopardy, published in 1970, in the early 1970s. And of course, Triple Jeopardy consisted of racism, sexism, and imperialism. And then finally, I could evoke the Combahee River Collective and their call for what they termed an integrated analysis, an analysis that embraced gender and class and sexuality. And they're called for recognizing, as they put it, that all of the major systems of oppression are interlocking. I simply want us to recognize that we are following historical precedent, that intersectionality is not a term that was just recently developed within the context of the academy, that as a matter of fact, it emerged from the activism of Black and Brown women. Finally, I'll say that it's very exciting at this moment. Even though there's so much suffering and pain, and we're recognizing problems that should have been recognized 100 years ago, but here we are now. Here we are at a moment, at a historical conjuncture where the possibilities of radical transformation have never been greater. And I think I'll conclude my opening remarks with that. You have to excuse me. I'm a professor, I lecture, and I tend to go on and on.
You go ahead and professor away, because we will listen. Do you hear me? I know the Congresswoman and the Commissioner were like, go ahead. So thank you so much for that brief history of intersectionality, because we know of how complex and how many additional names and contributions made it possible for it to even be in the mainstream discourse today. And now I want to invite Angela Conley, Commissioner Conley, to provide remarks, and I'd like to introduce you as well. So the last time I saw the Commissioner was at the site where George Floyd, may he rest in peace, was murdered by police. And we were there morning after morning, just holding space, grieving with community. And I think that is the essence of who you are and how you lead. You lead in the streets, and you lead as the Commissioner of District 4 for Hennepin County. And for nearly 20 years, Commissioner Conley has worked tirelessly to change systems in the macro level, both at the state and county, in ways that are holistic, first person, and seamless. She proudly serves as the first African American and one of two first persons of color to ever be elected to the Hennepin County Board. She's also the first commissioner, if I'm correct, to have worked in the county before becoming commissioner. Most recently as operations coordinator for Family Public Assistance, working with issues that helps families who are in poverty in our state. Commissioner Conley's top priority includes families, including communities in every decision. She's made promises to challenge the status quo in her campaign, and I can say as a resident of your district as well, that you have delivered and continue to deliver. So I am so proud to have you here. You are also historical in every right. And with that, I would like to invite you to provide some opening remarks.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I am in a little Black girl's heaven right now. Little 13-year-old Angela Conley, way before the thought of commissioner ever even came about. I was reading the autobiography of Angela Davis and throwing my fist up and saying, my name's Angela too. And if she can be as amazing as she is, then I can be too. I'm honored to be in the presence, Congresswoman Omar, of you, and knowing the work that you do, and the ways that you shape how people think about an issue. Professor Davis, the way that you make people lean in more critically than they would have by framing an issue. And that's something that I have really tried to do in this role. And with this leadership position, you mentioned being out there every day in George Floyd Square, taking care of community. I came into my role as an activist. I've been an activist for as long as I can remember. And if something's not right, it's just not right. And no level of leadership should change your activism, because it always lives inside of you. That fight is always there, an even stronger fight for Black women, I'll say. And as we're talking about social movements, Professor Davis talked about this moment that we're in right now. When you think about this major social movement that Minneapolis has become the epicenter of after the egregious murder of George Floyd, you'll find Black women who are leading that charge. And we lead that because we know firsthand what it's like to be neglected and to be oppressed and to be silenced. Let's talk about Sojourner Truth, and a former slave and one of the most powerful and effective anti-slavery speakers in the lead up to the Civil War. Harriet Tubman, as we all know, the courageous Moses of the war itself, rescuing thousands from bondage and risking her own life in the process. Journalist Ida B. Wells, who exposed the brutality of lynching for the world to see, and the founding of the NAACP, and of course, Rosa Parks, the mother of the civil rights movement, who not only refused to give up her seat, but kicked off a movement that changed the nation, that would change the nation. And we see this all around the world. In fact, right now, as we speak, we're witnessing a historic uprising, fighting to overturn systems of oppression that have existed, that have sat with its boot on our neck for centuries, for as far back as we can remember, systems designed to do just that. And once again, these are efforts that are being led by Black women and non-binary folks. I mean, when I think about Minneapolis, I think of organizers like Candace Montgomery and Miski Noor and Janelle and Marsha, who wake up at 6 a.m. and go to George Floyd Square and sweep it up and take care of it and rearrange the flowers. I think of legislators like Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. So, most of us as Black women, we're born into pain. We're born into pain. These paths that we take to get into the positions that we're in to create change, they are not easy paths to take. However, through struggle and perseverance, that builds power, and we build power on behalf of the communities that we have been tasked to represent and trusted to represent. So I just want to just say thank you from my bottom of my gut. Thank you for acknowledging Black women, for supporting Black women, and most of all, for empowering Black women. I can name specific ways that you, Professor Davis, and you, Congresswoman, have empowered me specifically. So just thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's actually a perfect segue into diving into our conversation. So I've already mentioned that this is a loving space and a loving group of Black women. Congresswoman, you mentioned how Professor Davis organized in defense of Ilhan Omar, Black women in defense of Ilhan Omar. Last year, when you were attacked from multiple angles for doing your job, Commissioner, you mentioned how the Congresswoman and Professor Davis have influenced your path into the work that you're doing. What this demonstrates to me, right, if we're talking about erasure and the ways Black women have not been seen, is that Black women see each other. And so before we talk about erasure, I want to talk about how we see each other and just provide this space, much to what you were just saying, Commissioner, and provide a question to each of you about how you see one another and how you see Black women providing a space and support for one another in our collective struggle for liberation. And I am going to ask Professor Davis to kick us off in answering that question and invite Congresswoman and Commissioner to build on what Professor Davis contributed.
Oh, that's a really wonderful question because I think it speaks at first to the fact that if one looks at the history of Black women, one sees an enormous amount of sacrifice. Black women have always been concerned about everyone else, as Anna Julia Cooper wrote, when and where I enter, all Black people enter with me. The entire world enters with me. Black women have been so concerned about all of the major social and political issues and have always been in the forefront of struggles and movements. However, Black women have frequently not been concerned about their own welfare. Back in the 1980s, I became a member of an organization called the Black Women's Health Project. It's now the Black Women's Health Imperative. And what we were trying to address was the tendency of Black women to become so involved in everyone else's issue that there was rarely time left to think about our own physical and spiritual and mental health. And so what has been so exciting about these last few decades is that we have recognized that we also have to stand up for ourselves. I've said many times in speaking that when I was a young activist, I was out there with all the other young Black women saying, "Free the Black man." And we didn't even recognize that we weren't even talking about freeing ourselves. Our whole notion of Black liberation was a masculinist notion. And I think it's so wonderful now that we finally get to experience the amazing leadership of Black women like Congresswoman Omar, like the leaders of the founders of Black Lives Matter, like the Black women who are now spokespersons in this struggle for justice, this struggle for the future.
I appreciate that. And I have my questions prepared, but in introducing yourselves and providing opening remarks, you all have called on and called in Black women in history and in the present who are not here with us today. So Congresswoman Omar, would you like to build on what Professor Davis has said and how Black women see each other, especially in a world that attempts and fails to render us invisible?
Yeah, I mean, when the professor was speaking, I was just thinking about also, right, and this is probably something that we experience every single day, is that even when we do take time, right, to recognize our pain and our space in that struggle, oftentimes others don't see us as also victims, right, of a society that has been oppressive, and that there is that intersectionality of pain that we are moving in these spaces. And there is a lot of internalization of what you are as a woman, as a Black woman, to society, right? In the ways in which you are trained to show up, from childhood, from birth. you know, you're supposed to feed your family, you're supposed to endure the pain, you're supposed to be strong and hold everybody down, right? Like these are the messages. And for us, we don't often pause when it comes to holding everyone down. What we pause for is when it comes to holding ourselves down and caring for ourselves, and even giving each other, right, like the space that is needed in order to heal, and in order to continue to build. And for me, I have been very conscious of the ways in which I not only care for people, and my tendency, right, to rush, to carry everyone in that room with me, but also my tendency to want to forget about myself, and what it means to be a leader that needs to model, right, in creating not only that self-care, but also in creating a space where you are turning the mirror on everyone else to say, look who else is leading, right? Mm-hmm. Who else is doing the heavy lifting? Look who else is out there creating change. And so in many ways, not only do we take the time to bring our ancestors who have paved the way for us to now have this opportunity to fight further for equality in society, but it's also important for us to recognize others who are doing it right now in the spaces that we exist. And you know, in all of our introductions today, we've brought in people, right? And there's always space. You know, I was born in Somalia, and so there's a woman named Arawelo who I bring into every space I'm in, because the spirit of being a Somali woman who seeks justice rests with her, and that is where, right, our spirit as Somali women to carry and exist in a space that fights for equality and justice comes from that. And I don't feel full and as myself if I am not acknowledging that spirit that's giving me that strength. And so it is important for us to know that our strength comes from somewhere. There are others who have taken the beating, like Professor Davis, in order for us today to be unapologetically ourselves, to speak in ways that people get uncomfortable with, and to know that we can continue to lead and hold our own, because we have seen her survive and thrive. And so we are not afraid, right? And that piece of it is important when you are calling on your no longer existing or existing ancestors for that strength to continue to do the work. And I think as women leaders, oftentimes, and more so maybe for me as a Black woman leader, we are expected to see each other as competition, right? To fight for a space to exist and space to occupy, where others might not be. And what I have learned from a young age is that I am made better, and my shine is brighter when my sisters are able to shine and thrive with me. And the ways in which society has conditioned us is something that we actively have to fight against, and actively have to acknowledge and push aside?
So what I'm hearing is you talking about honoring Black women and the work that we all do and that each of you leads. And so Commissioner Conley, I want to ask you, there are names that we know of and names that we may never know of. And Dr. Davis has said we have to use our collective imagination to invoke these names and honor them because we may never know them on paper, right? So I want to ask you, when you walk into your board meetings, when you're making these decisions that are historical and that will impact families across the state, across your county, how do you honor the women of the families you're serving and the women that you carry so close to your heart?
Thank you for that question. It's a really good question. I think speaking to exhaustion is really important here. I can't tell you how many times I have to explain what equity means, or how many times I have to explain what systemic racism really is. When you are in a position where you're representing 1.2 million people, and there's never been a Black person in your role before, you are called to speak very, very unapologetically about how the system that you represent has continued to just railroad Black women and families and break up Black women and families and break up Black women from each other. And calling that out is exhausting. Finding the policy solutions in an archaic set of policies is exhausting. So I want to just tap into that piece about this fight and how we are finding ourselves and how there's so much going on. In the district I represent, we went from a huge fire at a overflow shelter for families, most of them women with children, to a pandemic where a number of Black women were losing their jobs, to the murder of George Floyd, who called out for his mother, and how many more mothers have been called out to that we don't know about because it wasn't filmed. I think about how many mothers are sleeping in parks in my district right now, and I take that with me as determination. But there's also, honestly, as Black women, we feel guilt when it's fight, 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 and we're told, how are you taking care of yourself? How are you taking care of yourself? What do you need? Can I get you some tea? How can we support you? And it's like, I don't know. I'm not thinking about that right now. I got this, I got that, I got that. We got to do something about that. There's a fight. There's something going on down here. There's a march down the street. It's like, there is so much. And it's easy because it's second nature, I think, to Black women to fight, that we just go from one fight to the next fight to the next fight. So there's this meme going around right now that's like, pick your battles. Okay, that's too many battles. Okay, put some of those battles back. Okay, that's still too many, but it's funny because it's relatable. So when I'm making decisions, we just declared racism a public health crisis in Hennepin County, because I said, let's call what it is. Let's call it what it is. There's systemic racism running through the veins and everything we do as county government. And if we're not going to call it what it is, we're not going to get anywhere. So choosing to announce that that was a thing that was coming on Juneteenth, of all days, was empowering. It was also a fight to get it to pass. So I'm taking with me into these struggles the spirits and the voices of Black women who I heard throughout my adult life. When in my intro talked about my previous work in working with families who are living in poverty, and families who majority Black families who were relying on the county for assistance, and the hoops that we were putting them through. And I am taking those voices with me as the reminder to keep this going, keep doing what you're doing something right, and we're going to be all right. And at the same time, recently learning that you can do that and relax and light some candles and put some lavender out, and just like take care of ourselves, because because we deserve it. So it's a fight, and it's exhausting, but it's worth it in the end, because as long as we have each other, right, not to be cliche, but we are so strong when we are unified, as we saw last year, Congresswoman, unified around each other. That is strength in and of itself, and that's what gives me strength. This right here is giving me strength. So.
Commissioner Conley, you are absolutely doing many things right. Dr. Davis, I'd like to invite you to perhaps share your thoughts about the politics of Black women leadership and the politics of sacrifice, especially in this long struggle that continues, that is not near being over, even though we are in moments of huge change. You already brought up some of the history with the Combahee River Collective. We invoked Harriet Tubman's name. We talked about Audre Lorde's commitment to self-care. Share with us what's on your mind as we're having this conversation.
Well, you know, I'm thinking about all of those Black women who helped to shape the current political moment, who helped to create the arena on which we struggled, but who by and large are not recognized. And I'm thinking about Black women whose names are rarely known. I mentioned in my opening remarks Claudia Jones, who wrote this amazing piece in 1949, An End to the Neglect of the Negro Woman. She was born in Trinidad. She lived in the US, and because she joined the Communist Party, she was arrested. She spent time in jail, and when she was released, she was deported to Britain because, of course, we're talking about colonialism, and Trinidad was a colony. And there's a wonderful book about her that gives us a sense on the part that radical Black women have played in forging paradigms of leadership. And it's a book by Carol Boyce Davis, and it's a book about Claudia Jones. And the title of the book is Left of Karl Marx. And she entitled her book Left of Karl Marx because Claudia Jones is literally buried in the Highgate Cemetery in London to the left of Karl Marx. So if you go to that cemetery, you will see this towering statue of Marx and then a gravestone with Claudia Jones' name engraved. Claudia Vera Jones, born Trinidad, 1915, died London, December 25th, 1964, valiant fighter against racism and imperialism. And I think it's so important to evoke women like this because I truly believe that internationalism is key to our capacity to give leadership and engage in struggle. And we live in the United States, which officially sees everything in a US-centric way. And you know, all of us are encouraged to believe that we live in the best country in the world, the most powerful country in the world, the whatever. And we don't ask ourselves what we can learn from people who are struggling in other countries. You know, what can we learn, for example, from Black women in Canada. Canada is adjacent to the US, and most people in this country have never heard of Marianne Shadd, or they don't know that Viola Desmond's image is on the Canadian $10 bill. And I think about Brazil, that has these really rich Black feminist traditions of struggle, and women like Leia Gonzalez and Beatriz da Sarmiento and Luisa Bayros, who was an elected official and became the Minister of Racial Equality under Lula. And I think it's so sad that we don't look elsewhere for inspiration and leadership and solidarity. Of course, in Brazil, 2.5 years ago, Marielle Franco was assassinated by a former policeman, this wonderful Black woman activist who was anti-militarist, of course, anti-racist, and active on behalf of the LGBTQ community. And right now, I want to evoke this incredible trans woman, Erica Malenguino da Silva, who was just recently elected to state Congress in Sao Paulo. She is the first trans woman ever to be elected to Congress. I'm saying this because I think that as we imagine our own struggle, as we attempt to develop new modes of leadership, as we listen to the women from Black Lives Matter movement and their insistence on collective leadership as opposed to the traditional individual masculinist, charismatic form of leadership, that it's important that we have an internationalist lens. And I so appreciate Congresswoman Omar for drawing our attention to this, for not capitulating to those who tell her that it's all right to be in solidarity with everyone else in the world, but just not Palestine. And so this internationalist perspective makes us stronger, gives us greater capacity to move in the direction of justice and freedom.
Yes, I want to say amen to that. And thank you so much for calling the names of all of those brave and courageous women around the world. The best part about Black women's leadership in our political struggle is Black feminist policy, which each of you lead. And sometimes we say it's okay for firsts to be elected, as long as we're not having radical policies that push us to be more progressive and actually fight for liberation that matters. Congresswoman, your leadership has been critiqued because you not only became a first, you became a first with real meaningful policies that challenges a lot of what this country has stood for. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see Black feminist policy being in this time of our political movement?
I mean, for me, it's been really important to think about sort of what the synopsis of this conversation was in every policy discussion I'm in, right? Thinking about how are we being erased in policy making? How is our pain, our struggle, our joys, and our ability to build wealth and to not only survive but thrive being implemented and legislated in Congress, or whether I was in the State House or when I was at City Hall. And, for me, I take cues from what happened as we took part in the fight in the movement for women to get the right to vote, right? The Black women did not have that right be implemented for them as it was for white women. And so, when we're thinking about the ways in which we put pieces of legislation together, is making sure that we're not being left behind, that we are having our voice and our vision be implemented so that our lives can be different. And so, when I put my Homes for All piece of legislation that guarantees housing, is with the lens of knowing that the Black community is disproportionately impacted when it comes to those who are unhoused, or housing insecure, or dealing with issues economically as it relates to housing. And having leaders like Angela Conley give us support in what it means for us to strengthen it and to cover everyone, has made that piece of legislation deal with issues like gentrification, deal with issues in creating, funds to stabilize neighborhoods, because we are community builders, right? We are the gatherers. Our mama's places, our auntie's places are the gathering places for the neighborhood. And so making sure that kind of placekeeping and placemaking was part of a legislation that guaranteed homes for people. And, when we think about things like healthcare and advocating for homes for all, it's not lost on me that here in the United States, Black women are 4 times more likely to die just for wanting to give birth, in regards to their white counterparts. And so that is something that not only do we legislate with by guaranteeing healthcare for everyone, but it needs to have a specific lens and have a cultural lens, and have, right, a race lens in order to make sure that in the richest country of the world, in the country, as Professor Davis says, that we are told is the greatest country of the world, that we don't continue to die for wanting to give birth, for wanting to create life. And so it is, for us, in the ways that we fight, we bring our whole lived experiences to the streets when we are fighting for change. And people have been very uncomfortable that now that we are legislating and that we are in the halls of power, that we are bringing our full lived experience in advocating for these policies. And particularly for me, being, right, like the first person of the Black race to be in Congress, who was born outside of this country, to bring a lens of internationalism, to bring a lens that builds solidarity for workers across the border, to bring a lens that fights for justice, regardless of where that justice needs to be fought for, has been met, right, with vigor from those who don't appreciate and understand what it means when we say I can't be free unless everyone else is free. And that is something that we recognize.
Right, and I think that's a great point for me to invite Professor Davis and Commissioner Conley to chime in and build on what the Congresswoman is sharing. They're telling me we have about 5 minutes left, so 2 minutes each, on how you connect Black feminist policy to Black women's leadership.
It's thank you so much, and I cannot agree more. They didn't expect us to come in bringing a whole bunch of other Black women with us. They sure didn't expect that, but that's exactly what they got. We, as a collective, are a powerful, powerful, powerful thing to behold, to witness, to see. So when I'm thinking about policy from the county's level, I'm thinking about how are we directly changing the lives of the Black women who are reliant on the services that we provide? How are we changing the lives of the Black women who are coming out of our court system? So these are policies that always have to be shaped by people who have lived experience. So not only did I work as a caseworker and family cash assistance before I got to where I am today, as a young single mother in my early 20s, I was receiving cash and food benefits from the county. So these lived experiences combined with the lived experiences of others. There is not one type of policy change, whether it's bringing community voices into county decision-making through a race equity advisory council or the racism declaration or trying to secure shelter for Black women. None of these ideas have been without Black women with lived experience. So policy change needs to and should often always start with who have we listened to, who are we bringing into this work with us to help advocate for us, as the policymakers have to be the ones that write out the long bills and the board action requests and all of the other technical details. But I will say that we've just got to be listening to each other and bringing each other with us into these spaces. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Professor Davis, I think you are providing us with some of our closing remarks before I thank everybody on how you connect Black feminist policy to Black women's leadership.
Well, I think that Black women's leadership today is one of the most exciting developments of the recent period. And you know, I'm someone who's been around a long time, and I can remember when I got my first job, I was the only Black person, the only woman, of course, the only Black woman. And I think that, yeah, this phenomenon of the only or the first is acceptable, as long as the surrounding structures remain the same. I mean, this is actually the problem of the notion of diversity and inclusion that does not also include transformation. In so many institutions now, there's increased discussion about the importance of diversity and inclusion. Let's hurry up and let's find some, you know, Black women or Black and brown women so that we can say that our institution is diverse. But if the institution remains exactly what it was when it excluded them in the first place, they're simply asking Black women to participate in the whole process of exploitation and oppression. So what's so exciting about this period is that the Black women leaders are saying, no, we refuse to be the only ones. We refuse to capitulate to the existing structures. We want change. We want transformation. I've been a prison abolitionist since the 1970s, and it's so exciting now to hear serious calls, even within the mainstream, for prison abolition or changing the way in which policing functions in our society. And so the calls for defunding the police are actually calls to reimagine what safety means, what health means. How do we really guarantee that our communities are healthy and safe? And armed human beings who are charged with developing violent responses are not the answer to that. So I'm very excited about this new period that has been heralded by amazing Black women leaders. And thank you, Congresswoman Omar, and thank you, Commissioner Conley.
Well, thank you to everyone. So because we have one more minute left, I would just like to close with inviting each of you to finish this sentence that I will start, okay? For the Black women leaders leading in our movement today, I wish you fill in the blank. Congresswoman?
I wish you strength and joy.
I wish you peace and wellness.
I wish you perseverance and pleasure.
And I wish each of you our deepest, deepest gratitude for the work you lead, for the brilliance you've brought to this conversation, for the hope you represent. You carry so many of us on our backs, and we carry you in our hearts every day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Congresswoman, for holding this space, and each of you be well.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lalit, and thank you to our wonderful Angelas.
Power of Angela.
Yeah, here to Black Women Power.
Yes.